Let's take a look at this quote, highly successful software construction company that was recently listed for sale at an asking price of $1,700,000. There's a lot of unique and interesting things, if not odd things, in this business listing here. So let's unpack all of the details, and as we go through it, I will share some of my experience-based insight into this business listing and what I think about it. On that note, if you're out there and you're interested in acquiring an established and profitable online business, here's a quick plug. You'll probably be interested in my Acumen Wire newsletter. It's a newsletter I run where I send out online businesses that were recently listed for sale with my quick take on the business in a focus on established, profitable, and time-tested businesses. I'll put a link below to acumenwire.com so you can head on over there and get signed up. Now, let's take a look at this listing. We're going to skim through it here and I'll call out some of the details and then we'll come back to the details. First thing here, right at the top, cash flow SDE, $630,000. And if we do the quick math on that relative to the asking price, that makes it a 2.7x valuation multiple. Quite low for a software business. And while I mentioned that term software business, let's just talk about the title here. Highly successful software construction company. When I first read that, I'm like, okay, is this a business that builds software for other companies and they're referring to it as a construction company? Or do they make software that construction companies use? We will see it as software for construction companies here as we go down the listing. Anyways, cash flow, $630,000, but EBITDA, $220,000. That's kind of weird. A lot of times on bizbuysell.com, you'll see the same number in both places or one number just omitted. But to have such a radical difference there, right? I mean, like the EBITDA is like 66% less than the cash flow. To have such a radical number there is very, very, very odd. So we'll unpack that. That's kind of talked about right here. I also want to point out this is a 30-year-old business, 34-year-old business. It was established in 1991. I'm recording this on August 22nd, 2025. So very aged business. All right, let's see here. The detail purchase price includes cash and short-term investment amounts included in the cash flow to be transferred to the buyer totaling $410,000. We can see the difference right there. It all maths out from this EBITDA to cash flow. We'll come back to this point here. Let's go down to see what the business actually does. This business specializes in creating easy-to-use high-end software that aids construction contractors and estimators across North America with digital takeoff job estimating designed to simplify complex tasks within the industry. The software this company provides helps clients save time and improve accuracy throughout the estimating process. It allows users to open digital plans, measure lengths, areas, and counts, and quickly turn those measurements into estimates. Everything works smoothly within spreadsheets, allowing the data to be used right away for construction bids, reports, or project planning. And they described it as state-of-the-art software worth $650,000. 30 years old, top-tier service, strong reputation. If you're looking for a business that combines leading technology, reliability, and industry expertise, this is it. They've got 3 employees. The market is enormous, and there's a lot of opportunities for growth. You just have to stroke a $1,700,000 check, and you can take over that growth and build equity. Just like that. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about this a little bit more in depth now that we know the details. First thing, this EBITDA and cash flow and this $410,000 is just very weird. I don't know how else to say this. Because essentially what you're getting is a $410,000 discount on the asking price, right? Like you buy the business for 1.7, but it comes with $410,000 in cash and cash equivalents. Okay, fair enough, but why do they need to do that? Why not just list the business at $1,290,000 and omit it? You know, it's very rare that we see such a huge cash flow transfer relative to the business's size, and this thing is only doing $340,000 a year in revenue. Very, very odd. I really don't know what to make of this or why they would do this other than to juice up this cash flow number, kind of manipulate it, so that when you do cash flow to asking price, you see a low multiple there at 2.7x. But anybody that is capable of writing a $1,700,000 check, at least 99.999% of them will certainly recognize that the EBITDA is only $220,000. And if we map that out, that's like a 7.7x valuation multiple, right? So things get very high. That is very odd. The other thing here is the FF&E amount is based on proprietary source code rights valued at $650,000. And I'm going to guess and assume that in this case, they're referencing the amount of development that they have on the books going into the software. But it's kind of a nebulous number because that doesn't mean the software is worth $650,000. I could invest $1 billion to make a Facebook clone, but if nobody uses the software, it's effectively worth $0. So it's really completely irrelevant to the business's valuation. Maybe not completely irrelevant, but largely irrelevant. The cash flow, especially on a 30-year-old business here, is what is substantially relevant. Now, let's talk about this 30 years thing here and what the business actually does. They make software, obviously, as we've described, that allows contractors to estimate projects, okay? And it's been around for 34 years. That's like a long, long time in the software world. Software has certainly changed, and what this really makes me wonder is how much updating has the software had? How current is it? How competitive is it in the current marketplace? Because over just the last 3 years, there have been a substantial number of competitors coming up with AI-driven solutions and such to aid in the estimating process for contractors. So is this software now obsolete? That is something you'd really want to flesh out. And I would want to look at, as a buyer doing due diligence, I would want to look at the trend of revenue over the last 10 years, right? I would not just focus on the last 3 years, because 3 years ago is when ChatGPT and all the AI stuff really started coming out. I'd want to go back before that and see, where is this revenue, how's this revenue doing? How is it holding up? Is this sticky? Are these customers staying, or are they churning and dropping off? That is something I would really, really want to know. And ultimately, if they are churning and dropping off, this business is going to be like catching a falling knife, because then you've really got to rework all of the software that's underlying the business, right? Like what's actually powering it, the $650,000 worth of proprietary source codes. You may have to rework that if users simply aren't using it, to come up with something that is more competitive in the marketplace. That's really, really what you've got to check out for. A lot of these aged SaaS businesses, sound good, and they are good if the users and the customer base is sticking and staying put. But if they're in decline, it is not where you want to be as a buyer. Because in that case, why not just go, if you've got to invest a bunch of capital in development and, kind of refigure the product market fit in the competitive landscape, you might as well just take your $1.7 million, or maybe not even $1.7 million, $200,000 metaphorically, and invest that into spinning up some new software and marketing it. Yeah, so a lot going on here, a lot potentially changing in this business. One thing I will say, because they call out the market is enormous. Yeah, the market is enormous, but in 30 years, they've only got $348,000 a year in revenue. I mean, there's certainly businesses in this space doing that. I mean, I was going to say monthly revenue, but that even seems low in monthly revenue. That'd be, roughly a $400,000 a year business, or $4 million a year business. They're doing that $348 a month in revenue. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of room to grow, but if this business is in a downtrend, it can be very difficult to turn around. It's much easier to ride a tailwind than it is fight a headwind. So let's talk a little bit about the valuation here, right? First of all, we have this cash thing in here, and I would say the proper way to look at the asking price is this minus whatever cash you're getting. I don't really know what they're doing with this, but if we just did what is effectively $1,290,000 divided by 220? You get a 5.86 multiple. Is that justifiable for this business? And that really depends. If this business is, I would say if it's growing, then yeah, that is, right? If your software is current and the business is stable or growing, then that makes the valuation multiple here justifiable. But they haven't called out anything in this listing about reworks to the software, improvements, or development costs. And based on the revenue to EBITDA, and only $128,000 difference, I don't see a substantial enough difference to indicate that anything has really gone into development. Maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the seller is a developer and he has redeveloped anything. But usually, in software businesses, if they've done any redevelopment, it is called out in the business listing. So I would say this is a very lofty valuation, assuming optimistic or optimal and growing conditions inside the business and the financial data. For a business that is stable or declining, this is incredibly high. If this thing's running on the code that has largely been in place for years, maybe 10 years, I don't know, probably not all 30. It certainly has had some updates in there, but if it hasn't had any substantial updates, if there's a lot of competition, it doesn't really have any unique value add prop, and what we're seeing is the revenue declining and the customers falling out, right? This business is in decline. I would say a more like a 3x valuation is likely at that point. Somebody would probably pick it up and plan for reinvestment, somebody very experienced with software and maybe has some kind of adjacent business to this, could pick it up and do a turnaround at 3x, maybe even a little higher at 4x, but I think 4x is going to be on the lofty side, because why pay for it? Why pay that significant of a valuation multiple if you're already in the space, right? Or if you're in the software space, when you could just spin it up yourself, or this business goes out of business and ultimately the customers just come back to the market here. Yeah, a lot going on with this. Just a very unique listing, unique wordage, unique factors in the business listing here. If I were interested in a SaaS business, I might take a look at this here, but I would certainly not, unless things are optimal and not as I expect based on these details, would not come out swinging here with a 5.86 valuation multiple or an offer based on that. I think there's a lot of work to do in this business, and I think this is slightly overvalued. And I'd certainly want to uncover why in the hell they have this $410,000 of cash to be transferred to the new buyer. On that note, guys, what do you think about this listing? Is there anything you feel like I'm missing out on? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful or insightful, you know the drill. Smash that like button to help me out in the YouTube algorithm. I am calling it a wrap and signing off on that note.